I wasn't raised religiously. I was brought up with this understanding from my mom where she told me that growing up, she would ask people who went to church, people who were followers of the Bible, questions that they didn't really have answers for. She would ask them, okay, they say that God started everything. Well, where did God come from? And they would always get stumped at what seemed to be a very simple and straightforward question. They would actually get angry and defensive with her. So that's what caused her to turn away from the church. And this idea was planted in my mind from a very young age. As far back as I can remember, the question, where did God come from, has been on my mind. I was raised in a mid-sized Midwestern city in Indiana where there's some church Christian influence in like the schools. When I went to elementary school, there was like a trailer that would come by once a week, and we would do a little Bible study type thing out there for like an hour, learn the Lord's Prayer, a couple little lessons about religion, softball stuff. You weren't allowed to really ask questions because I tried and they didn't like that. I was exposed to a Catholic church here in town because my Mexican grandmother took me to church a couple times when I was young, but the experiences didn't really stick with me. It all just kind of went over my head at that age. But I still had a curiosity, and I wanted to understand where religion came from, what it was, why people found it so important. Especially since I had questions that seemed really simple, but didn't have good answers from anyone that seemed to follow these books. Now, the grandma that took me to church, I wasn't really that close with that side of my family. That's a whole other story, but growing up, there wasn't really much of an opportunity for me to have conversations with her or that side of the family to just figure out where they were coming from, why they were Catholic, that kind of thing. So I turned to the internet for answers, as I feel many people in my age group did. I'm a teenager, 14, 15. I start roaming around on the internet just out of curiosity at first. It wasn't really even looking for answers about religion. It was just looking for answers about the nature of our reality at that point, because I'd been raised in schools with the belief system of materialism, basically atheism, where everything is a mechanistic, cold, hard, logical, calculated. Everything happens because of something, and it's all going back to the Big Bang. That whole theory of events with Darwin's evolution, and everything they say is the gospel truth. As I've grown, I've come to understand that science is really another religion because of dogma. That's what it comes down to. Whenever something becomes dogma, when it becomes unquestionable, you've got a problem. And the way our modern peer review system works, it's basically all about who has the most money and who has the most influence. It's not about who's right or who is asking the best questions or has the best theories. It's not about that anymore. It's not about truth. It's about what's going to make them the most money. And if you don't realize that, I'm sorry to be the one that breaks it to you. But I'm getting a little bit off track. My quest for answers really began whenever I was in my high school chemistry class. Our teacher showed us this video about the double slit experiment. And it went over all of my peers' heads. They were just kind of like, oh, that's cool, and went on about their day. And I was like, hold on a minute. Particles behave differently whenever they're being measured or observed? What's up with that? That's weird. And, I'll get the physicists who are like, you're misunderstanding that. That's conceptual misunderstanding that the observer effect has anything to do with conscious observation and doesn't have to do with the interference of the measurement tool being near the apparatus and blah, 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 blah. Look, I have looked into this, and there's a lot of debate about it, and it is not settled, so don't come at me as if it's fact. But that was a jumping point for me. I was like, hang on. Reality isn't solid. like the way that classical physics describes. I'd never heard about quantum physics before this, and so it really piqued my interest. And it led to me being a lot more curious online, like looking for answers and asking big questions rather than using the internet for like entertainment purposes, where prior to this I would just like get on YouTube or play RuneScape, stuff like that. So I started using Google, searching around, trying to find stuff, and I came across this website called Stumble Upon. Stumble Upon was like a really early version of like algorithm based or interest based web searching, where you could put in different interests. It might still exist actually, but you would put in different interests, and I selected like science and tech and whatever. I don't remember, but it would give you web pages that were aligned with your interests. You would hit the little stumble button in the top corner and it would put you onto a random web page. And so you would find new websites like this. One of the websites I came across doesn't exist anymore. It was called Above Top Secret. That was my real intro into the side of the conspiracy realm on the internet. And oh my god, that's like a whole other story unto itself. But basically, I learned a lot there. A lot of stuff about debate and discussion, about how to source things, how to think critically about the information I'm being presented, because the people there took things very seriously. They didn't just take anything that someone said as truth. It was, there was a vetting process. It was a community of people who took sharing this information seriously because they felt that there were real conspiracies, despite the label that's a bit of a misnomer where you call someone a conspiracy theorist and that means crazy. That's not really true. They do that kind of on purpose to dissuade people from researching. Well, I started off there and found a bunch of other websites through there, and years and years and years later, here I am. I have learned so much that it's hard to even know where to start to describe where I'm coming from, but I've come to a spiritual understanding of the world. I've come to understand that religions are kind of like a control scheme. I know that might sound harsh if you're someone who follows a religion, but it's like they give you this box that they put you in, and they say that this is the truth. This is the only truth. And anyone else out of the dozens or hundreds of other books and religions and teachings out there, they're all wrong. You're the one that's right. Only you. Congratulations. And that's a big ego boost. It makes you feel great about yourself. You're like, yeah, I picked the right one. But really, like in all honesty, these books were written by people. They were written by other people. They were ideas that were brought forth by another human being. Whether it was actually channeled from some higher force or not is up for debate. We can't actually prove that, okay? So we have to go off of using our minds to discern what is true and what's not. We have to reason our way through it. We can't just accept things at face value. That's being lazy intellectually. That's allowing someone else to do the thinking for us. When we say, this is the truth because the book said so, and the book says it's the truth, so it must be the truth. It's circular thinking. You have to be able to break yourself out of that. And so I wasn't raised that way. I was never brought into that loop, and I was never made to think that way. And so it's easy for me to see beyond it, in a sense. And I feel bad for people who are caught up in religion, because there's so much of it that's weird when you're from the outside looking in. Like for me, when I look at Christians and Catholics, the whole thing with Jesus and the wafer and the body and blood of Christ, that's weird to me. You're doing like some sort of blood ritual. You're eating his body and his blood? Okay, and then don't even get me started on Judaism and Islam. Like, there's a lot of stuff wrong with that, where like it's okay for them because their book says it's okay. Now, I get it. There's moderate people who practice these religions and they don't follow it to a T. Not talking about them. I don't want to get bean souped here, okay? I'm just talking about the extremism that religion allows. It's not okay. And I feel that it's part of a larger control mechanism that is used by structures that exist above and beyond religions. They sit there with the puppet